my friend Walt Drake here. Walt is a docent here at the Lion Air Museum. You're here every Thursday, and you're here now a long day on Thursday. Yes,
Long day.
long day. Walt, when did you join the Air Force?
December 7th of 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And I just graduated from high school, so I was 18 years old. And then President Roosevelt lowered the age from 21 to 18 for flight training. And living in Pasadena, I would see that P38 flying over in the late 30s, which was being built over in the Burbank, Glendale area. And I figured that's what I wanted to do. And so when he lowered the age from 21 to 18, I was in first year of community college out of high school. And I went down to the post office in Pasadena, and the line was around the block to enlist down there. And when I got to the window after about an hour, they said, well, you got to go to Glendale for aviation cadet training. And so I went to Glendale, and the line was just as long over there. So in March of 1943 is when I was sworn in as a buck private, and waited until they called me as an aviation cadet.
Very good. So I understand there was a P-38 squadron here in Southern California.
It was a 434th Fighter Squadron based in Lomita, California. One was in Glendale, and I think the 435th was in Palmdale. When I got to Europe in February of 1944, March of 1944, they moved the 479 fighter group.
Until he's used to being here.
They moved to England, and we were in an orientation squadron up in Scotland when I got there. And so we had our choice of units to go to. They had them posted on the bulletin board. And so I recognized the 479th needed about 4 replacement pilots. So I talked to 3 of my other buddies. We all went and joined that unit. And they were stationed in Ipswich, England. And it was about 69 miles north of London. And we were a part of the 8th Air Force 1st Air Division. And our main job was escorting these B-17s.
So were you flying the P-38s then?
We flew P-38s for half my tour, and during the invasion of June the 6th of 1944, our squadron patrolled the beachheads for basically 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th of June. And when Eisenhower pulled the trigger, that was June the 6th, as we all know.
So you were flying on D-Day. What was it like being in the air over the beach in Normandy?
Well, we were 10,000 feet, and our only job was just to keep the Germans out of the sky. And General Eisenhower wanted to control the skies, and we did. And there probably was maybe 200 or 300 of us patrolling from Calais to Bordeaux, and that's about a 200-mile run up and down that channel and then the coastline there. So we controlled the air during the invasion. There wasn't much we could do about the ground fire that was coming from down below. And before the invasion, we did some strafing along the beachheads, but these bunkers were 10, 12 feet thick of concrete there, and we couldn't do anything about it. So I guess the cruisers in the middle of the channel did a lot of shelling of it, and I'm not sure they did that much good there, because the ground fire was murderous from what I found out later on.
So in France, when you would fly missions in the P-38, what are some of your memories of that?
Maybe some of you remember Paris was declared an open city, and the Germans didn't destroy it, and we didn't bomb it, and so we'd fly around it. And I don't believe that Paris suffered any damage at all from either side at the time. But our main missions initially were dive bombing railroad yards, strafing trains, and boats on the Rhine River is what we did with the P-38. And we got some escort work for the B-17s. But the 38 didn't have the range that the P-51 had, and we could just barely get to Berlin and back in the P-38. where a P-51 we could get there and back and still have fuel left over. So halfway through our tour, they switched us from the P-38 to the P-51.
So what was it like flying a big twin-engine airplane strafing barges on the Rhine?
Well, when you're 19 years old, you know, you think you're indestructible at the time, and it was fun up until we started losing people. And then we began to think, well, I may be the next one. And so I'd never partake of alcoholic beverages or smoke till I got to Europe. But I thought, well, I better enjoy this before the next day I may not can't do it, you know. So anyway, it was the P-38 was a great ground strafing aircraft. And if you got into a dogfight with a P-38, you couldn't stay with the 109s or the 190s, because if you got into 450, 500 miles an hour going straight down, you get terrible tail shudder. And we didn't know at the time that was compressibility coming in. And with a P-51, we could follow them all the way to the deck and not have any problem with it that way.
So when you went on missions, you'd fly from England, you'd in the air for, what, 5-6 hours at a time sometimes?
Yeah, during the D-Day patrolling, we didn't carry any bombs or extra tanks. We just carried a lot of ammunition because we could get back to our base, reload gas, and get back out there. So that day we flew 3 and 4 missions each day during the invasion. My longest mission was to Prague, Czechoslovakia, and that was almost 10 hours in a P-51. And there's where we learned you don't drink liquids at night or in the morning.
So tell me, 10 hours on an aircraft, did you have any food? Did you bring any water? How'd you pee?
That's the problem. That's why we didn't drink water. And we had Gsuits on. When we got the new P-51s, they gave us Gsuits so that they were hooked up with a vacuum tube on the P-51. And we had an accelerometer on the floor, and we could tell how many Gs we were drawing. And in a P-51, you could draw 8 or 9 Gs pretty easily in tight turns, or pulling out in some pretty steep dives. And a G-suit in one case just saved my life, or I'd have been gone if I hadn't had that G-suit on. And so it was you have the G-suit on and all your other clothing on, because it's 65 degrees below zero up there. And if you touch the aluminum with your bare hands, it almost freezes on the spot. It's that cold up there. Until you get down to maybe 10, 12,000 feet where it warms up a little bit, it's just freezing.
I can see why you didn't want to use the relief tube.
Well, I smoked at the time, and we could hardly wait till I get from 30,000 feet down to 10,000 feet so I could light that damn cigarette. That's how bad it got.
So 10 hours on a mission, you're up there, you've literally haven't eaten. Did you eat anything in the morning before you take off, or do you?
Well, we'd eat breakfast in the morning because they're basically all powdered eggs and toast and no liquids in the morning. And then we'd take off usually at, depending on the length of the mission, anyway, it'd be dark when we'd take off. So the time we got over the channel and got formed up. Now you got to remember, when we were forming up, there'd be 1,000 of these B-17s forming up at the same time above us, and then we'd take off maybe 30 to 40 minutes later and we'd be formed up. So mid-air collisions were not uncommon in those days. And sometimes I'd come out of the clouds and I'd almost touch a B-17 flying above me. And then I'd dive back down and hope I didn't hit something coming down there. But 1,500 airplanes forming up over England is a real thrill.
And you guys are in and out of the clouds.
In and out of the clouds, yeah.
Just hoping you don't hit anybody else.
Hit somebody else.
So tell me, did you have any weather issues flying back and forth to Europe, especially in the summer?
Well, all the weather was always a problem. In fact, in most cases, weather was kind of sometimes our worst enemy over German fighters. Because we get in these weather conditions, and I wasn't a good instrument pilot. I knew how to read the dials and the artificial horizon and that type of thing. But when you get into violent weather, everything spills. All your gyros will spill, and then you've got a real problem. Because vertigo sets in. You don't know whether you're upside or right side up or what. And it's a strange feeling when you lose your horizon. Those of you who are pilots know what that is, when you can't know whether you're upside down or right side up.
So tell me, did you have a situation that got bad doing that?
Well, the worst situation I had was in October 30th, 1944. We were over Hanover, Germany, just this side of Berlin. And we were supposed to meet the bombers and bring them off the target, the B-17s. And the weather got so bad that we never did find the bombers coming off. And then Colonel Zemke, who was our group commander, I was his wingman that day. And he's, well, we're going to get above this stuff. And we were at 25, 30,000 feet, so we drove right into it, and that's the last I saw of him and my wingman. And I was really the only one that got back that day from between Hanover and Berlin. And I came back alone, and Zemke was a prisoner of war. The colonel behind us, he was killed. And my wingman, he became a prisoner of war. And so when I got back, I was, thank the Lord.
It's an amazing story. Does anybody have questions for Walt? Love to get some questions from people out here.
When you transitioned from the P38 to the P51, how long was that transition training? How many hours did you have in the P51 before combat?
Well, we just got notice maybe a week or two before that we were going to get our brand new P51s, and I happened to have about 75 hours in P39s in training. And I was the only, the Lomita bunch, they had was the P38s. And so when we got the new P51s coming in, why they made me the checkout pilot for the P51, because I was the only one that has single engine time in a fighter plane. And so the colonel says, well, it's got a propeller, it's got an engine, it's got a joystick, and you're a pilot. And go to it. And so that's basically how we checked out from the P38 to the P51. And the big difference, of course, was the torque. The P38 twin engine had no torque, but on the P51 you use a lot of rudder on the takeoff to get off that ground. And if you got 800 or 900 gallons of gas on board on a P51, we had drop tanks, and and the torque would hit you. You really had to kick that rudder in to keep the darn thing level. And but with the P38 we could carry 500-pound bombs and tanks, and no torque, and that was easy to get off the ground. So that, of course, in my mind, that was the biggest difference that we had there. And the P38 advantage was if you got an engine shot out, you could come home on one engine. The P38, you get a shot out. I mean, the P51, why, you're going down.
Okay, other questions? Rod, did you have them?
Right. So considering how good stick and rudder pilots were in World War II, how long did it take to check out from the P-38 to the P-51?
Well, in flying school, most of us, as cadets, we all basically flew the Stearmans, and then the T6s, like this T6, that's what I flew in advanced school down here. In fact, we went from the T6s down there right to the P38s there. And so from single engine to twin engine. And so if you had some single engine time, you were aware of what torque can do. And except with the P51, it was pretty powerful compared to like a T6 down there. And the fellows that made it that far through advanced training and into combat training were pretty savvy people usually. And so it didn't take a lot of training, just you memorize the cockpit and some of the emergency things that you had to know, and you just let them go. And that's what we did.
Was the P-38 the first twin you flew?
Well, I flew AT-9 in advanced flying school, which is a twin-engine bombardier trainer there. And I see you're in the Marines. When I got out of flying school, they stationed me with the Navy at North Island Naval Air Station.
Lucky you.
Lucky me. Well, I'll tell you, we ate like kings. We had linen tablecloths, and I had a Marine captain and a Lieutenant JG as my roommates, and our shoes would be set out in the hallway, and you guys would have your...
Well, they probably taught you how to eat with a knife and fork.
We did. It was great. It was great living because we found out how the Navy lived, and it was great, much better than ours.
Very good.
If you're able to discuss the problems that you encountered during strafing missions.
Well, the P-38 was a good strafing airplane because it had the 450 caliber and the 20 millimeter cannon in the nose, and you just aim the airplane where you want the bullets to go. And same way, if you got into a dogfight, you had the gun sight, but it was a P-51. The bullets were 3 guns in here, and it converged out here. And so in the P-51, we had a ring gun sight, and on our throttle, we had a control that we could open and close that ring like this. And we'd get this wingspan of the German plane in this circle. And if you got him in the circle, then you could shoot. But if you couldn't get him in the circle, you were just wasting your ammunition. Where the P-38, you didn't have that because everything was straight ahead. So for strafing, the P-38 was much nicer. And then you had 2 engines on one on each side. And to a great extent, it protected you from ground fire.
What was the fuel range on the B-17? The fuel range on the B-17?
The question is, what was the fuel range of the B-17?
Oh, the B-17, they could fly 12 to 15, 14 hours in the air. They had tremendous range, much more than we did. And I don't know what the fuel capacity of them were at the time, but they 9 to 10 hours was about our maximum, and they'd go maybe 12 or 13 hours on these B-17s.
What was your cruise speed when you were on those missions?
Well, we'd cruise at probably 250 to 270, and these would cruise at about 190, so we'd have to do S's so we could stay with them, and even though we'd take off maybe 30 minutes behind them, we could catch them by the time they got over the channel and got into Germany there.
When were you rotated out of here?
We were in a little town called Ipswich, which is in East Anglia. It was about 69 miles north of London at the time. And we were not too many miles in from the North Sea up there.
Another question? Yes.
Did you ever encounter any German jet or rocket airplanes?
About the last of my tours, I ran into a German jet. We were over the Zuider Zee, which is in Holland, and I saw this plane coming at me, and it didn't have any propellers, and I didn't really know what a jet was because the Germans were way ahead of us in their aviation because this plane came and we passed one another, and I was like, boy, that's a German, but he has no propellers. And we did know enough that we were told that they didn't have the range or the ability to stay in the air very long. So I outturned him twice, and then he ran out of fuel or something, and I left. Because if you tried to outrun him, that was your death warrant there. So that was my only encounter with a German jet. Now our squadron commander shot down a German rocket, and the only reason he shot him down is the guy ran out of rocket fuel and caught him at the landing pattern.
Question for you.
Did you know your last flight was going to be your last flight, or did you fly after it?
Yeah, pretty well. When you had to have 300 combat hours. In my case, it turned out to be 68 missions. And when I was in my 65, 66 mission, the squadron commander came around and said, if you want to sign up for an extra 50 hours, we'll promote you to captain. And I thought, well, I don't want to be a live lieutenant or a dead captain. So I decided to bail. I came home.
Did you fly after that?
I flew in the 452nd Bomb Wing, which is based up here in Long Beach. General Gsuits was the head of it at the time. And when the Korean War came along, well, I couldn't pass the eye exam, so they made me a finance officer. And so they didn't need finance officers in Korea. So I stayed in the reserve as a finance officer for about 25 years. And on active duty every summer, I'd go to an Air Force finance office someplace at Marchfield, San Francisco, or even down LAX had a big Air Force finance office down there.
So Walt, tell us about your career after you left the Air Force.
Well, I went into the S&L business. First, I went over to Burbank and talked to Western Airlines to see if I got a commercial pilot's license. And this is 1946. It starts you out in the right-hand seat. It's at $175 a month. And in 5 years, you could move to the left-hand seat, and these were DC-3s. You'd be making $225 a month. And I was married then, had 2 kids by then, and I needed more money than that, so a friend of mine had his dad run an S&L in Pasadena, and he said, well, go see my dad. And so I did, and he hired me, and I stayed there for 41 years.
And you were the president of the SNL at the end, right?
I wound up the chairman of the board, and then we were acquired just before I retired by the Weyerhaeuser Company out of the state of Washington. And then after I retired, Weyerhaeuser, they'd acquired a lot of S&Ls, sold us to Home Savings or Great Western, and then they went bankrupt, and the government took them over, and now most of them are Chase Bank today.
Was that Republic Savings and Loan?
Yeah, Republic.
Okay. Very good.
We were just a small company. We only had 18 branches, where Home Savings was, I don't know how many, they had a zillion branches, I guess. And Great Western was a big one. And so we were a small company. But the one that really created the biggest disaster was it Washington Mutual out of Washington, I think. And when they went down, why then a lot of the others had followed there. And the government made deals with the banks to take them over. And so the FDIC would guarantee that if you take this over, we'll give you some benefits for taking it over.
Funny how history repeats itself. Any other questions for Walt? I'm sure we have some more questions here. Okay.
I wanted to know on your bucket list, what haven't you done that you still want to do?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Since my wife passed away, that I just live one day at a time. Not really anything that I like to play golf. And for my 92nd birthday last month, my son and daughter-in-law took me to Torrey Pines for a week of golf. So that was fun there. And last year they took me to Alaska on a cruise, and that was fun. But when we were married 63 years, and when you suddenly find yourself a widow, it's difficult. But I have the 4 sons, and so I do have that.
Well, thank you, Walt.
Welcome.